You still know what you want. You can still picture it clearly. That's the part that makes no sense. It's not like you forgot your goals or stopped caring about the people around you. You just can't. You sit down to start something and there's this wall, not made of fear, not made of laziness, just a flat, blank wall where the feeling used to be. You used to be able to push through. Now the push itself is gone. And the worst part is you've started doing the math on yourself. Maybe you were never actually motivated. Maybe the person who used to do all that stuff was just performing. Maybe this stillness, this strange inertia is who you actually are. That thought is wrong. But your brain made a calculation, a very precise, very cold-blooded one. It decided, based on real evidence it collected from your real life, that effort is no longer worth the cost. That's not a character flaw. That's neuroscience. And once you understand what triggered that calculation, you can actually start to reverse it. So, your brain made a calculation, and it didn't ask for your permission first. That's the thing that's hard to sit with. You didn't decide to stop. You didn't wake up one morning and choose to feel nothing about the stuff that used to pull you out of bed. The drive just wasn't there anymore. And because there was no obvious reason, no single breaking point you can point to, you filled the silence with a story about yourself, that you've changed, that you were never really that person, that something essential is missing now. None of that is true, but the story makes sense because from the inside, that's exactly what it feels like.
Here's what's actually happening. Your brain is constantly running a cost-benefit analysis on every single thing you do. Not consciously. You don't feel it happening. But before you pick up a pen, before you open a document, before you text someone back, your brain has already priced out whether the reward is worth the metabolic expense of the action. Researchers at the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne found something striking. They measured brain chemistry in real time while people made effortful choices. And what they found wasn't about willpower or mindset or discipline. It was about a compound called lactate. When lactate accumulates in a specific region of the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for effort-based decision-making, the brain reads it as a resource emergency, and it responds by issuing a veto, not on one task, on everything.
The part that most people miss. This isn't a targeted shutdown. It's a system-wide one. The brain doesn't decide that work is too hard. It decides that effort itself is too expensive. And once that decision gets made at the metabolic level, it doesn't matter what your goals are. It doesn't matter what you want. The signal doesn't make it through. You sit down to do the thing. The intention is there, and then nothing. Not resistance exactly, just a kind of blankness where the forward momentum used to be. There's a name for what you lose first. It's not pleasure. Treadway and Zald, two neuroscientists who spent years mapping the reward system, drew a distinction that most people have never heard of, the difference between wanting and liking. Consummatory anhedonia is when you stop enjoying things once you have them, but what happens in sudden motivational collapse is different. It's motivational anhedonia. The enjoyment is still there if the thing lands in front of you. You can still laugh at something funny. You can still eat a meal and taste it. The liking system is intact. What's gone is the wanting, the anticipatory signal, the neurochemical pulse that makes your brain lean forward towards something. That's what flatlines. And without it, the gap between intention and action becomes enormous. You know what you want to do, you can describe it clearly, you just can't make yourself move toward it. That's not a personality trait, that's a dopamine system that stopped predicting reward. And here's the part that starts to explain why it happened. Your brain's reward system isn't just tracking pleasure, it's tracking whether your actions are producing the outcomes they're supposed to produce. Every time you work hard and something meaningful comes from it, a real outcome, a felt result, Your brain reinforces the belief that effort works. Psychologist Robert Eisenberger called this learned industriousness. The effort itself starts to feel rewarding because it's been paired with results often enough that the pairing becomes automatic. But that conditioning runs in both directions. When effort stops producing outcomes, not because you stopped trying, but because the environment became unpredictable, or the goalposts moved, or you did everything right and it didn't matter, the brain recalculates. Diaz-Ferreira's research showed that after an extended period of uncontrollable stress, the ability to adjust behavior to match new outcomes was completely wiped. The brain stopped believing that its actions had any bearing on reality.
And when it stops believing that, it stops initiating action. You might recognize this in a specific, quiet way. You make a detailed plan, you feel briefly like you're in control, and then you don't follow a single step of it. Not because you forgot, not because something came up, but because somewhere below the surface, some part of your brain had already filed the plan under irrelevant. It had already decided that the map doesn't match the territory anymore. There's one more piece that most people never connect. There's a structure deep in the brain called the lateral habenula, small, ancient, barely discussed outside of neuroscience. And its specific, ruthless job, is to function as an emergency brake. Carl Dieseroth's lab at Stanford isolated exactly what it does. When the brain accumulates enough failed predictions, enough moments where effort produced nothing, the lateral habenula reaches a threshold, and when it fires, it sends inhibitory signals directly to the regions responsible for drive and movement. The shutdown is total, and it's fast. It doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like something being switched off. The organism Dieseroth studied kept going until the environment made it clear that going changed nothing. The lateral habenula crossed its threshold. The movement stopped. Not from exhaustion, from a precise calculation that further effort was metabolically indefensible. You share that break. And here's what's uncomfortable about that. The brain that pulled it isn't malfunctioning. It's working exactly as designed. It collected evidence from your actual life, the uncontrollable stressors, the effort that didn't land, the standard you could never quite reach no matter how hard you pushed. It tallied all of it, and it made a call. The motivation didn't leave because you're weak. It left because your brain decided, based on real data, that the cost of action had exceeded the probability of return. That's not a character flaw. But understanding it doesn't automatically fix it, because the brake doesn't lift just because you understand why it was pulled. Here's the thing nobody wants to hear. The brake is protective. We covered that. Your brain pulled it to stop the hemorrhage. But a brake that stays locked doesn't protect you. It just keeps you parked. And at some point, the question stops being, why did I lose motivation, and becomes something harder. Is the environment actually broken, or have you just stopped believing it can change? Because those two things feel identical from the inside, and only one of them is true. Think about it. Subscribe if you want to keep thinking.